Is your soul completing its final incarnation? How to understand it? Since ancient times, humanity has asked itself the question, what awaits us after death? Is life just a short spark, or perhaps each soul goes through a long journey across numerous incarnations? Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, claimed that reincarnation is not a punishment, but a great gift. Each life is a new chance, a new lesson, a new step for development. But what happens when the soul completes its learning on earth? Are there signs that we are living through our last incarnation? One of the most powerful sensations accompanying souls at the end of their earthly cycle is a deep sense of alienation in the material world. You may love life, admire its beauty, build relationships, but at the same time remain an observer. As if you are living in a beautiful theater but understand that the stage and costumes are only temporary decorations. This is not depression and not indifference. This is a quiet certainty that true life is much deeper than daily bustle, than the race for status or possessions. What seems important to others acquires a completely different meaning for you. Edgar Cayce described it as a cosmic longing, a memory of the soul's true home, which we unconsciously search for throughout our lives. The second important signal is the feeling of deep déjà vu. But not just a short-term "I've seen this before," rather vivid, often prophetic moments when you know exactly what will happen next. You may intuitively know places, people, or events with which you have not encountered in this lifetime. These moments are breakthroughs through the veil of time, when your other incarnations momentarily intersect with the present. According to Cayce, when the soul completes its earthly cycle, space and time begin to lose their rigid boundaries for it. The third sign is a change in attitude toward death. Where others feel fear or anxiety, you feel peace. Death ceases to be the end. It becomes a transition to another state of being. When Cayce immersed himself in trance states, he shared that souls approaching liberation from reincarnations carry within them the memory of previous transitions. Death for them is no longer a dramatic catastrophe, but a natural process, just like the alternation of day and night. And finally, another important feature is the strengthening of synchronicities in life. Strange coincidences, which cannot be explained logically, begin to occur constantly. You think about a person, wherein they call you, you ask a question, and within an hour you stumble upon the answer in a book or a video. Cayce believed that when the soul comes closer to completing its earthly path, it begins to see that reality is not something external and unchanging. We do not merely live in the world, we interact with it, creating reality with our thoughts and intentions. Hints, whispers to us from the soul. Are we ready to complete the circle? Another characteristic sign of completing the cycle of incarnations is a change in the attitude toward desires. Where once the soul yearned for success, recognition, love, now a quiet fullness arises. This is not indifference or apathy. It is a natural understanding. Everything truly needed is already within. External goals no longer dictate the path. Instead, an inner peace is born. Perhaps you have noticed, ambitions do not disappear completely, but they no longer carry anxious energy. You act not to obtain or prove something to the world. Your actions are an expression of the joy of being, not an attempt to fill an inner void. Cayce called this state the dissolution of karmic bonds. Karma is not punishment, but the result of desires and fears that draw the soul again and again into new incarnations. And when desires naturally fade, the soul becomes free. Another sign is a shift in the perception of reality itself. The material world, which once seemed solid, now appears like a fragile veil. You sense that behind the dense forms of objects, bodies, events, something greater is hidden. This is not theoretical knowledge, but a living experience. Reality seems fleeting, like a dream, and true being, as if somewhere beyond ordinary perception. Interestingly, modern scientific hypotheses, in particular the holographic universe theory, confirm the world may only be a reflection of deeper levels of reality. Those approaching the completion of their cycle begin to experience this not as an abstract idea, but as a daily reality. In certain moments, the world dissolves into light, things become streams of energy, and the boundary between I and others disappears. The next important manifestation is recognizing oneself beyond the personality. Your name, your role in society, even your personal history, begin to feel like a mask, not a false one, but simply temporary. You realize the true I is much deeper than any definitions. During his trance sessions, Edgar Cayce called this the attainment of superconsciousness, a state where the personality is no longer perceived as the final truth about oneself. Here the need to be someone or prove something disappears. You simply are, and that is enough. With such vision comes another facet, deep empathy for all living beings. You feel the pain, joy, and fears of others as if they are part of you. This is not sentimentality. This is deep knowing that all beings are reflections of one light, one breath. This empathy naturally transforms into compassion, effortless service, and selfless care. Cayce believed that true completion of the incarnation cycle is impossible without the dissolution of the illusion of separateness. As long as we perceive others as not I, we remain trapped in division. But when we see ourselves in every gaze we meet, the road home becomes open. The last steps on earth. What the soul feels before returning home. Another indispensable sign of a soul completing its cycle is the liberation from repetitive patterns. What once held you captive, fears, addictions, reactions, dramatic relationships, begins to gradually fall away. Not because you become perfect, but because the inner mechanism of suffering no longer has power over you. Once grievances could fester in the heart for years. Now pain comes and goes, leaving silence behind. Once fear paralyzed the movement forward. Now fear is acknowledged and lovingly embraced, and it dissolves. This is not a battle. This is healing at the deepest level. Edgar Cayce spoke of this as karmic completion, the moment when old stories no longer need to be relived because their lesson has been fully learned. Those who go through this sometimes notice difficult situations that used to repeat many times in life suddenly lose their force. Toxic relationships end without anger. Old pains no longer fill the space of the heart. A lightness appears, similar to coming home after a long journey. When these 9 signs begin to merge into one, the soul remembers itself, not as a personality with problems and ambitions, but as light that experiences, learns, loves, and is finally ready to return. But what happens next? What happens to a soul that completes its circle? Cayce approached this topic with great caution. He emphasized, true completion cannot be described in words. It is not an exit into emptiness nor a merging with something impersonal. It is the expansion of consciousness, not disappearance, but a return to the original infinite state, enriched by the experience of all lived lives. The soul does not dissolve. It again becomes part of the great flow, preserving within itself the wisdom of its journey. It is a state of deep unity and at the same time boundless individuality, a paradox that cannot be understood by the mind, but can be felt by the heart. If you recognize even a part of these signs in yourself, it is not a reason for pride or separation from others. On the contrary, true awakening always leads to a deeper connection with life and with people around. The soul completing the cycle does not run away from the world. It becomes a part of it even more deeply, but now without fear, without attachment, without illusion. It does not impose its wisdom. It shines quietly, reminding others the path home exists, and every soul will one day find it. Perhaps even now, reading these lines, you feel something familiar, deep, primal within yourself. Not new knowledge, but a memory of who you have always been, and who you remain beyond all stories. And if so, perhaps you are already standing on the threshold of your last step on earth. Awakening in the dream. What life looks like on the verge of departure. There is another subtle, almost invisible trait of souls completing their cycle, the transition from seeking to presence. At a certain point, you stop searching for enlightenment, truth, or liberation. You realize that what you were seeking was never lost. It has always been within you, under every breath, in every glance, in the very simplicity of existence. The path that once seemed endless disappears because you are already where you need to be. This realization does not come through philosophy or logical constructions, but through deep inner knowing. What once seemed like the goal, to become better, to reach spiritual heights, to understand the universe, now appears as a beautiful but unnecessary dream, because life itself, in all its everyday simplicity, is the answer. Another deep sign is the spontaneous feeling of unity with all that exists. You no longer divide the world into me and others. When you look at a tree, a flower, the face of a stranger on the street, somewhere deep in your heart a quiet truth echoes. This too is me. And then the pain of another becomes your pain, the joy of another, your joy. You can no longer harm another because there is no other. Cayce called this state cosmic consciousness, not as an achievement, but as a natural stage when the soul is preparing to return. Here there is no longer pride in your spirituality, no desire to be chosen, only a deep silence of love that demands nothing and excludes no one. Also, there often arises a perception of physical death without fear. It no longer appears as an end. It is like another transition, like removing an old garment. Sometimes in moments of deep silence, death feels almost familiar, even long-awaited. Not because life has lost its meaning, but because meaning is no longer limited to physical form. This is not indifference or an escape from life. On the contrary, it allows you to live each day more fully, attentively, deeply, because there is nothing more to lose. When the fear of death disappears, the pure taste of being remains, true, open, unconditional. And finally, the deepest sign of a soul completing its earthly circle is the return home, here and now. Not in the future, not after death, but in every breath, in every heartbeat, in every flicker of consciousness where everything that is accepted without struggle. You no longer seek paths. You yourself are the path. You no longer strive to be someone else. You already are who you are meant to be. And perhaps at this very moment, reading these words, you feel that quiet peace, that silent joy that has no cause. Perhaps you are already awakening in the dream. And then every step, every word, every glance becomes a celebration of remembering who you truly are. And this is the deepest miracle of all worlds. Beyond the cycle, what happens? After the final incarnation, when the soul completes its last human life, many imagine it as a triumph or a grand transition. But the reality, as described by Edgar Cayce and many other spiritual teachers, is much subtler, calmer, and far deeper. There are no fanfares, no triumphs. There is a quiet meeting with one's true essence. The soul does not disappear. It does not dissolve into an impersonal ocean of energy. It returns home, to that part of itself that has always been free, boundless, and unchanging. This state is hard to describe in words because words themselves belong to the world of forms, while liberation is beyond forms. It is like awakening after a long sleep, in which you lived hundreds of lives, felt millions of emotions, played thousands of roles, and suddenly realizing that you have always been the one who observed this dream. What happens after this awakening? According to Cayce's accounts, souls completing the cycle attain freedom. Not the freedom to move on in the usual sense, but the freedom to exist in union with everything without losing their uniqueness. They can choose to remain in the world of forms as guides for others, or to immerse themselves completely in infinity without returning. Some of these souls become those we intuitively feel as guardian angels, mentors, protectors. Others return again, not because of karma, not out of necessity, but as a pure act of love, to help others find their way home. Those souls who choose to stay in infinity do not lose their individuality. They preserve their inner fire but no longer need form, time, or space. They are the light that shines through all dimensions of being. Interestingly, modern science is beginning to approach these ideas through the study of consciousness. Theories of quantum physics, the holographic universe, and multidimensional realities are gradually dismantling old notions of one-dimensional life. More and more scientists suggest that consciousness is not a product of the brain. It is the primary reality from which space, time, and matter are born. And it is precisely to this primary reality that souls return after their final incarnation. But the true magic is not in what awaits us later. The true magic is that you can already touch this eternity within yourself. It is not somewhere far away. It is in every glance, in every breath, in every silence between thoughts. Because the completion of the path is not about death, it is about awakening to life. True, free, infinite life that never began and will never end. If, reading these lines, a quiet joy or a sweet peace awakened in your heart, know this: you are not alone. Millions of souls beside you, in the visible and invisible worlds, are walking the same path of memory, awakening, and return home. And perhaps right now, you are standing at the final threshold. Do not rush. Do not be afraid. Everything is unfolding exactly as it should, because the truth is not where you are going. The truth is what you are right now. If these words stirred something deep within your soul, if you felt that beyond everyday life there is something greater than we are used to seeing, leave a like, not just for support, but as a sign that the light still burns in this world. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt this strange peace, this quiet knowing that everything is far deeper than it seems? Write here or leave a heart so that others who are searching know they are not alone. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Ahead lie many more journeys into the depths of the soul, many answers, and even more questions leading home. See you where words end and truth begins.